Today we're talking about an item that you probably haven't heard from in a while. And that item is Voidshield. We're gonna do a little comparison with another item that has a similar purpose, and then discuss its overall functionality, if it somehow fits in the meta or if it's really just bad. This video was inspired by a tweet by Cherio, where he was asking if you would see any reason to ever build Voidshield over Mystical Mail. As you can see in that poll, I answered with no, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the numbers and actually compare the items down to the core. Let's start with the very basic stats of both items. Voidshield costs 2,700 gold, and so does Mystical Mail. Voidshield has 30 power, Mystical Mail has none. Voidshield also has 20 flat protection reduction for enemies around you, Mystical Mail has none. Both share a stat though, and that is physical protection. Voidshield and Mystical Mail both have 40 physical protection each. As we already mentioned all these damage values on Voidshield through the power and protection reduction, it's only fair to talk about Mystical Mail in that regard as well, and that's the passive, which gives you 40 damage per tick. This is 1 tick per second, and it is magical damage. So while Voidshield enhances your damage, amplifies your damage, Mystical Mail rather works as a separate source of damage that is typically not the same as your main damage. Mystical Mail also has 300 extra health. Now, I could go all in depth on the effective health here, but that's not that useful when you don't know which other items the characters have built, what this is used with. And as both items have 40 physical protection, I can make it quite simple. You have the same health plus protection on Mystical Mail as if you were to build Voidshield in combination with Shield of Regrowth, or in other words, a 3/4 Stone of Gaia. So you get almost, if not a full item in raw health from the raw health items tree basically, by building Mystical Mail that Voidshield simply doesn't have. The incredible amount of extra tankiness you can get through this is almost hard to quantify due to the amount that it is. 300 health plus the protections translate into a lot more effective health, so you will at least tank 2 to 3 more abilities, and it also helps against magical damage at the same time, so your survivability is not only increased against physical, but increased in general. That means in order to compensate, Voidshield has to offer you a lot more damage, regardless of if you're playing an assassin or a warrior. So I ran a few tests. The first one is a very basic test. Now, as you know, your physical defense will scale up throughout the game, level 20 being the highest here, so we're starting with level 10. On level 10, just comparing basic attacks on Thor against the robot, your base damage with the basic attack is 91 if you have Death Toll and Power Boots. So that's the total damage for just a basic attack without any of the two items. If you add Voidshield into the mix, the basic attack damage goes up to 133. With Mystical Mail, we don't get any direct damage amplifications, so the base damage will still be 91. In addition, however, you have the Mystical Mail tick. Now, Robot still has a little bit of magical defense, and that factors in here. As such, the Mystical Mail will tick for 31 damage. That means the total damage with a Voidshield around this level is 122. So you have an 11 damage difference between Voidshield and Mystical Mail in favor of Voidshield on your basic attack only. We get to the abilities a little bit later. What's crucial to note here is that this basic attack damage here assumes that you hit 1 basic attack per second. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case if you have more attack speed than that. Usually the characters that build Voidshield will not go into much attack speed though, while Mystical Mail will always tick once per second. Mystical Mail, on the other hand, has the advantage of also ticking outside of the melee range. The range of Mystical Mail currently is 25 units, which is quite a fair bit away from the enemy that you can chase them down, you will still get the ticks. Depending on how you engage on your enemy, if you're walking into them in a team fight or from behind, or you're engaging with an ability, and how long you're chasing them, the damage here can either go in favor of Mystical Mail or in favor of Voidshield. It's really situational as long as we're just looking at the basic attacks. This assumes only hitting one target though. If there's another target nearby that maybe you're not even directly attacking, you will already get more damage out of Mystical Mail through the tick that deals damage to both in that case. An extra tick would mean an extra 31 damage, so the total damage would be 153. The question is if that damage is relevant, because for example, it could be on a target that you're not trying to focus down, it could be a tank, it could be that you need that little bit of extra burst against a particular target to kill them, or anything like that that still makes Voidshield more favorable here than Mystical Mail, despite the damage output possibly being higher at multiple targets. But we also just looked at the basic attacks so far, so let's move on to the abilities, which are usually more relevant when it comes to penetration or protection reduction. I did the same check on level 20 with a full build. This was like a bruiser build. The exact items were Warrior Tabi, Jotun's Wrath, Titan's Bane. Yes, I know it has a little bit of an effect on Voidshield, but really not much, and it's kind of crucial to have it in your assassin build at pretty much all times. Masamune and Spirit Robe. Without a last item, this resulted in 195 basic attack damage. With Voidshield, the damage increased to 243. With Mystical Mail, once again, you would have the same basic damage of 195, plus 31 for the Mystical Mail tick, as Ra's magical protection doesn't scale. So the total damage base was 195, with Voidshield was 243, and with Mystical Mail was 226. This serves as to show that with this build, you will actually deal more damage per basic attack in comparison to the level 10 version, because I know that somebody would otherwise nitpick about that. So we actually have a damage disparity of almost 20 here, 17 to be precise. The overall result will remain the same, which is why we're using Thor's 1 instead. We're using Thor's 1 connecting both times, which is a lot of base damage for an ability, but I wanted to see how far we can go with this in favor of Voidshield. The total damage of the hammer would be 586 base before we use any item. With Voidshield it would be 687, and with Mystical Mail again 586, because in this case we don't necessarily have a Mystical Mail tick connecting. If we had a Mystical Mail tick connecting, it would be 617 if you're close enough to the enemy. What do the damage values tell us though? If we were to assume an ideal combo of quick abilities and basic attacks with the Voidshield build, executed fairly flawlessly against a low physical protection target, then we'll probably get around 300 extra damage in a combo maximum. This is already assuming that you have the right assassin with the right high base damage values or the right warrior, and you get most of your basics off very, very quickly and attack cancel and everything. 300 damage is actually a familiar value, because that kinda corresponds with the extra 300 health that Mystical Mail has over Voidshield. So in a way, you're trading some damage for some health. But that's only and only in very ideal scenarios for Voidshield. In this absolutely ideal scenario, it would take 10 seconds with Mystical Mail to compensate for that damage through ticks, meaning that if your cooldowns were shorter than 10 seconds, you might get a benefit out of it, which they're probably not anyways. Furthermore, the benefits from Voidshield are heavily countered by building any sort of physical defense. And as it stands, a lot of people are building at least some degree of defense. The moment you have more defense, the flat reduction just loses value and the overall damage increase gets lowered. Furthermore, magical defense is in general less common. So you'll often see targets that have more physical defense in order to counter structures, minions, or even just due to the fact that most teams have 3 physicals and 2 magical damage dealers. Not to mention that some core magical defense items just got nerfed. And all of this still assumes that you're just looking to deal damage to one target. Sure, you have abilities that can hit multiple targets like Thor's 3 or Thor's ultimate as well, but you're likely to just focus out one target when you're building a more assassin kind of playstyle, kind of damagey playstyle, as you want to burst one target down. With Mystical Mail, the burst is lower because it's ticking damage, but at the same time you will be in the middle of a team fight longer because you're more survivable, and you will still be able to deal damage to everyone, and this damage stacks up. If you are able to end up in the middle of a team, then 10 ticks of Mystical Mail are something you're able to reach in 2 to 3 seconds, and it's not all that hard at all anymore. So there are 3 big benefits from Voidshield. A, you can still blink, which you can't with Mystical Mail if you get put into combat somehow, which is really frustrating. B, big physical AoEs can hit harder. And C, you have more single target burst. Maybe also D, you have the chance to give your allies some protection reduction, which gives them a little bit more damage, but usually that is outclassed by the extra damage you would get from Mystical Mail in return. For soaking up damage, being in the middle of a team and being more of a nuisance over a longer period of time, Mystical Mail is simply better. Now, if we're looking to quickly burst a target, we also have to ask ourselves another question. Which other options are out there? And there are plenty. You have Shifted Shield, which will bring more raw power to the table and also provides you with magical defense if you get low enough. You have Masamune, which also has very high damage values, gives you more mobility, which can be very nice, and still offers you a lot of protection when you're in the middle of the fray. And you have the raw damage items like Brawler's Beatstick that just do more in terms of single target burst for a lower price tag. And if you try to argue for Voidshield against all these, then the biggest argument against it is basically, yeah, but Voidshield does more in team fights as you hit more targets and you have that immediate protection. Well, here's the thing. If it does more in team fights and you're looking to fight in a team, once again, Mystical Mail actually usually ends up being the better choice. That's what we've discussed in all depth in this very video. So what's left at the end of the day is that Voidshield theoretically has a function and it should be able to execute it in very, very niche situations, but really I cannot imagine any situation where I would actually prefer it over either a more single target damage focused item or something like Mystical Mail that helps me more in team fights. I believe what holds Voidshield back the most, especially on Assassins, is the price tag. If the price was lowered again so it fit in more with your typical Assassin damage choices, I think it could become a much more viable pickup. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was insightful, I hope this was informative. If you enjoyed this and you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. Comment of the day from the Smite Circuit is not hard video goes to NeoPio. I don't think Circuit is too hard. The only thing that is still bothering me with her is that her ult is easily disrupted by freaking minions. We've all been there, buddy. We've all been there. DukeSloth, out.